All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 6. This is our first podcast, so I'm very excited about that. Today is Saturday, 11 a.m., March 22nd. Thanks, everybody, for joining. And I'm really excited about this podcast because we're really going to be talking to someone who really understands AI and is working with enterprise customers every day on this subject. And I think it's important that we kind of get through a lot of the noise that's out there, right? Kind of break through that noise and really talk about the reality of what's happening in the enterprise today with AI. And of course, we'll get into some fun topics around how to use AI from a personal perspective. But before we do that, I want to just remind everybody about how this series is played out and the direction we're going. So this is episode 6. And so generally speaking, what we've done is we started at the very foundation of what Nutanix can provide. And we started with Community Edition as it pertains to your home lab. And it's very similar, not exactly the same, but similar to what it would look like in production. And then we kind of moved on into the additional features and capabilities within the platform, right? So we started at foundational configuration, right? Deploying virtual machines, consuming storage, integrating DR, and then we moved into automation, and then we moved into unstructured data services, right? And then onto Kubernetes, right? So as we move into this, right, this is the natural progression of how our own customers are really leveraging Nutanix today, right? They're modernizing their data center. They're starting with moving away from 3-tier onto more of a traditional, or excuse me, away from a traditional stack onto more of a modern hyper-converged stack. And then they're expanding feature capabilities and service capability within that stack. And then, of course, move forward into their automation journey, and then obviously add in cloud native services. The next step in this phase, right, is really around AI. And I really think this is extremely important. Before I get into talking about and showing you our solution within the platform, right, around Nutanix Enterprise AI, I think it's imperative that we take a step back and just talk about the reality of where people are today with AI, right? And we always hear this expression of we have to meet our customers where they are. And that doesn't mean that we can't talk about the future and the roadmap and the innovation that's going to happen, but we have to look at where customers are from in a reality perspective, because there's a lot of noise that's happening out there around AI. And as a matter of fact, we just had the NVIDIA conference, right? And the NVIDIA conference was really talking about, and I'm going to talk to Daemon about this because he just got back from this, is robotics and where people are going, in the next level of AI. Well, enterprises aren't even there yet, right? So it's extremely important that we break through that noise, get down to exactly what we're seeing in the enterprise, what value AI is providing in the enterprise, what it's solving. That way you can take it back to your organization and say, we should start here, right? Or we should look at XYZ, right? So again, without further ado, I'm going to move into introducing Daemon, and we're getting into a conversation about AI and where we are today. So I want to introduce him now and bring him in here. All right. Hi, Daemon. Can you hear me?
Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. So listen, thanks for joining. I appreciate you taking time on a Saturday. I know it's a big ask to kind of ask somebody on their day off, right, at 11 a.m. When we want to be spending time with our families, et cetera. So I appreciate you joining the podcast today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Damon, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into AI as an interest, right, from a personal interest, and then how you're moving through enabling yourself around this technology.
So yeah, I've always been interested in what's going on in the cutting edge. So when things like blockchain started becoming the talk of the town and Web3 and so on, just to see where things are going, because you have to have one foot in the future in order to understand where the industry is going. So I really started digging into modern AI when the first signs of Chat GPT were starting to come out. So you look at GPT 3 and 3.5, and when I started seeing the potential of what could be done, that's when I really started digging in and say, okay, where is this going to progress? And embedding myself in every aspect of that, I saw that this was something that was going to explode beyond anything that we've seen in the past, beyond the move over to virtualization or to cloud or blockchain or anything that we have seen in the history of computing. So I really wanted to be in the forefront of it and ride the wave into the future as much as I could.
Yeah, no, that's great, and of course, one of the things I take away from this is, and you said it right, the speed of innovation that's happening in this space is not your traditional, your typical. I think we look at these things in blocks of 10 years, right, decades, right, of how traditionally, you know, innovation is happening, right? With obviously the move from mainframe to client server, and then into virtualization, and then of course now we're talking about cloud native, and I think we'll touch on that a little bit, how cloud native is enabling AI. But um, certainly, uh, let's talk about a little bit about the why of that, though. Why is AI exploding as fast as it is, and is it because the technology is actually innovating itself, or is it more of the technology adds so much value, right, that it's just exploding?
Yeah, the potential is just massive, and it's not just a hyperbole and hype. There's actual substance to it. So some examples of that are being able to do tasks that would take professional level subject matter experts a long period of time to do, and hiring people with that expertise. If you look at the alternative, you hire these SMEs in order to do research, to do domain specific tasks. It would take a certain amount of money in order to pay them for a month, 6 months, or so on. Now we're getting to the point where with generative AI and large language models, you're able to do those same types of tasks and abilities in a hundredth of the amount of time. The things that we can do now are also some things that would have been impossible to do in the past. So it's enabling uh, new types of business, new types of work and roles within the industry that we just haven't seen before. So being able to have the ability of a large team of programmers or researchers or experts in just about any field at your beck and call, being able to create those on demand and apply them to the problems of business. That's where we're really seeing the innovations. Uh, Being able to not necessarily replace people, because that's not what it's about. It's about enabling people to do things that there's no possible way that they would be able to do otherwise, either because of limitations of uh, costs, time, effort, the amount to onboard people, to train people. So giving people these abilities to have team or digital teams of their own to do new and innovative things, so that the businesses can focus on propelling themselves forward and being competitive, and uh, doing that in an iterative way. An example of that is if a company can focus time on innovating as opposed to just keeping the lights on, they can generate a large amount more revenue by doing new things and being competitive. That they become a lot more sustainable than an organization that's not able to do that and continues the same way. So I think you'll see over the next a few years, there's going to be a consolidation of companies by the ones that are able to adapt and change to this new market dynamic, and the ones that aren't able to adapt because they haven't changed the way that they do things, they're going to start feeling the effects of that, and it's either going to be financial or not being able to uh, compete by diversifying and adapting quickly.
Yeah, no, I think that's very legitimate. I mean, I think even when you look at one of these, I don't know if so one time I gave a presentation on where cloud native is taking, right, the speed of delivery, right, the speed of agility and delivery of applications and customer experiences, right. And the example I gave in that was, I compared two banks, right. You have a bank that's kind of lived in legacy world, and it's funny because I actually belong to a bank that's still kind of legacy. Um, and that organization, right? For example, they would roll out something like uh, something they thought was innovative, like, oh, now you can scan your checks on the phone and now it'd automatically deposit, right? And they thought that was innovative at the time. Meanwhile, they're competing against these modern innovative or startup banks that are coming out of the digital world, right? That have all this machine learning capability on the back end where it's tracking like your spending trends. You're able to track all of these things, right? And get real-time data and real-time, access to data so you can make smarter decisions, right? Around savings or investments or things like that. And meanwhile, my bank is focused on, oh, we just released this app that can scan your checks and now it'll automatically deposit, right? So I know that has nothing to do with AI, but it's similar. It's a similar thing, right? Like, meaning if you're not going to kind of embrace these new technologies, new innovative ideas, right? Then you're not going to grow your business, right? You may have a decent business, or you may be a business that has a proprietary model where no one else does it, and those businesses typically stand the test of time, right? Until someone else does something better or different, right? But in businesses that generally there's a lot of competition, like financial organizations, right? If they don't adopt these new innovative ideas, right, then obviously at some point they're gonna kind of go away, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
One
Sorry.
one way that I think that companies are adapting to embrace some of the new capabilities is um, organizations that are able to leverage AI are moving away from just single product or single service type organizations to ones that become service providers. So you can think of the ecosystems that are being built around that. From a retailer perspective, retailers are going to make more money if they have their customers engaging with them more. So being able to create digital communities on demand, creating content for social to keep them engaged, uh, provide more services and capabilities and marketplaces that would be associated with the retailers. That's one way that they're able to keep their customers more engaged. And you can enable that by leveraging things such as creating uh, content and posting that on social media on a regular basis, understanding market trends and what's going on with competitors and changing pricing real time, or finding out what the purchase history or the trends are of the customers, and then engaging with them through email call outs, through groups that are created, creating workshops. All these types of things can be enabled by generative AI. And in the same way that social media companies have been focusing on getting more screen time with customers, and Meta's been really good at that, and TikTok and so on. They've been able to grow and get a lot more revenue and diversify because they have the attention of the customers. So organizations are starting to do that in a similar way, but it's not just about screen time. It's about attention, mind share. How can you be more relevant to your customers besides just the initial product offering? So the diversification and the utilization of existing platforms and knowledge that companies have allow them to do that and to go into these different areas that they wouldn't have considered in the past. But now they have the capability to do that. Mike, I think you're muted.
Sorry, being able to expand services and customer experiences is paramount today, and I think that just has to do with the consumerization of things. I think, people expect. I always call it the now generation. We live in the now generation, right? I need to have my things now, right? And the convenience factor of applications like Uber and um, you know. The delivery service for food, or when you go to your grocery store, being able to just pick it up, order online, pick it up. Like, those are expected experiences, and those
Yeah.
experiences will translate back into the business, right? And the business world, whether it's a financial service, right? You expect your bank to have a now service, right? Or some other service capability outside of the traditional consumerization, right? Of media or content, or like I said, food or whatever, right? So before we get into like how where customers can really start out here, I want to talk about some of the misconceptions. And I know when I first started the session today, I talked about all the noise that's happening out there. I know you just got back from the NVIDIA conference, and I wanted to really talk about that. But what do you, before we get into that, what are you hearing as far as like the misconceptions out there? What are customers either confused about or misinformed, or maybe there's so much noise they can't really figure out how to really start?
So I think that there's a big fear of missing out on this AI wave, and every company wants to either add the word AI into their product or say that they're using AI so they can uh, have a checkbox with their executive team or to their clients, and what that actually means can differ drastically. I think it's very easy to get that checkbox done, and that may be as simple as getting a subscription for enabling chat services with large language models to an organization. But that doesn't really get you very far. That is expected table stakes. But the real transformation is changing the way that a business operates and enabling learning and sharing within an organization, creating a center of excellence so you can understand what the possible is. And then once you understand what the possible is, addressing specific business challenges in order to leverage AI to do something useful. So just having a checkbox or paying a bunch of money to an organization so that you have infrastructure that has infinite possibility, in my mind, it's useless. It's a cost sink in order to do. You need to really define how you're going to get value, and that's what I think it really comes down to is determining how businesses are able to hone in on specific value, get successes, do iterations and learning from those successes, and then expand from that. You don't have to go all in. You don't have to get a massive amount of infrastructure and grow into it, which has been the traditional way to implement solutions, especially when you start looking at like new technologies and innovations that are out there, or new applications that enable companies. In the past, it was build it and they will come, field of dreams type of mentality. This is very different. This is something where you find challenge and then you overcome it. You expand on that. You learn from that. You grow. You share your learnings within your organization or within your vertical. Companies are even sharing information with each other, where they may previously have been competitive and keep that knowledge as IP. It's now becoming more common to share within industries, within verticals, so that everybody learns how to do things and everybody is able to expand to the new possibilities that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think you talked about the iterative nature of how customers should be looking at this, and I think it goes back to traditionally how Nutanix comes in and solves problems, or traditionally did, right? Is to come in and look at use case specific issues, right? And address those issues. And even if a customer defines a use case, there could be a piece in that where you could start, right? And then iterate on that, right? To
Yeah.
maybe tackle the entire use case instead of going all in and being like, oh, I want to just completely fix this issue. Well, maybe there are sub issues or smaller micro issues within that that's causing the main issue that you can address first, and then be, like you said, be iterative and move into it at a pace where it makes sense. So obviously the safety. There's always this conversation around um, security and safety when it comes to AI, right? And you talked about sharing, but also things that are proprietary to enterprises. What are customers doing to kind of make sure they have safeguards in place, not just around the IP issue, right? Meaning the IP getting out into the world or being accessible, but also what are they doing around like data safety? Like how are they looking at data? Because I don't think this is honestly, I don't think this is talked about enough, because AI is really about using like you said, customer data or using your proprietary data to get advantage out of it, to get benefits, and somewhat. And I think if the data is not sound, right, if it's got bias in it, right, or any of those things, right, then obviously it's this garbage in, garbage out problem that still
Yeah.
exists. So how are customers tackling that side of it?
So from the data perspective, and data is a huge aspect of how you can really get value from AI. The first thing that I think organizations need to do is to understand the landscape of the data in their environment. Like, where is their data? Have they gone through governance exercises to see who has access to that data? Who's supposed to have access into that data? Where is it supposed to be? How is it being stored? Before you start leveraging that data in AI, you have to go through the process, do some governance, and understand the security and the applicability and the types of data that you have in that environment. And one way to do that is with our platform with Nutanix Unified Storage, we're able to really help with that, so that you can ingest it. You have a place that's able to scale out with file volumes, blocks, object, all the different types of things. So you can have a platform that allows you to ingest and get insights and provide a performance storage. And performance storage for your AI platform is something that also really needs to be addressed. The biggest barrier to expanding the capabilities and adoption of AI within an organization is technical debt. You can't go and do new things if you have to constantly fix and patch and keep the lights on of aging infrastructure and aging models. You can't adapt and change and iterate quickly in a strategic or safe way if you haven't overcome that technical debt. So making sure that you have governance on your data, that you have performant access to that data, and that you're able to ingest it in a secure way in your environment. So some ways that they can do that is you can ensure that you have uh, the right people accessing the right types of data. You have role-based access control. You have different types of ways of ingesting that data for AI. So one way of accessing internal data and applying it to generative AI is retrieval augmented generation. So the way that works is you have different data sources, and then you're able to ingest that, and then from that RAG, you're able to use it in order to get additional insights when you're doing prompts into the large language models. The way that organizations are doing that is you don't have a single RAG pipeline for all the data in the environment. You have subsets over to map to the different people and use cases that are available. So once you're able to map out who has access to what, then you're able to build out applications that again align to those same divisions and security profiles that you have within the company. So it's important to go through that topic first, understand who should have access to what, and then continue down that path when you're building out your AI infrastructure, so that it continues to align to those controls and those barriers and guardrails that you have in place. So after you've defined that, then you have to ensure that, okay, I have this RAG pipeline, I have this application that's accessing this data. How do I ensure that I'm protecting against bias or attacks on the environment, to make sure that the models themselves are protected? So this is where you have to implement guardrails on the prompts that are going into the model, and then the data that's coming out, to make sure that it's formatted in the right way, that you don't have IP leak information, that you don't have attacks that are going on. So implementing guardrails on the model is one way to do it, and we're able to do that now with Nutanix Enterprise AI. We can implement those guardrails with the models that we have available, and then we're also able to segment out the infrastructure with microsegmentation and application aware segmentation on the environment. So from a security perspective, we're protected that way. The next thing that also needs to be done is being able to to red team the AI environment. So having a team that is focused on trying to determine what your vulnerabilities are from that perspective. Whether this is done internally or externally, there's many organizations out there that are popping up that have done traditional red teaming that are now doing this with large language models as well. So if you want to go down that path from a security perspective, you also need to understand what the evolution is from a security perspective. There's many different frameworks that are coming out that help with that. ISO 42001 is the main one that allows you to certify against that from the ISO standard. NIST has the AI risk management framework. That's a really good one to align to, and I think the majority of enterprises are moving towards aligning with that and the controls that are put in with that. If you want some easy wins, then I would look at the OWASP top 10 for LLMs. And OWASP actually has like 8 different projects that are associated specifically with modern AI and the things you should do to implement it and protect against attacks. So having that practice in place, securing it from a security framework, an ongoing security practice, having the guardrails that protect against prompt injection and bias, doing the segmentation of the infrastructure, and then also understanding the data sources and who has access to that. So that was a bit long-winded, but I think
No.
that's the approach that organizations are starting to take.
Yeah, well, I think there's so many facets to it, right? It's I wouldn't say it's like what people do today. I mean, I guess the question I have for you is, um, when you're going into these enterprises and they're going through these processes to figure all this stuff out, right? To determine, are they building new organizations within, right? Or are they tasking the current, or like you talked about security, is now the security organization now tasked to handle the security side of AI? And is the data organization or the folks responsible for the data, are they now tasked, or are new teams being built? And I hate to say this, but new silos being created in enterprise to handle all of these things you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's a really good point because I think that has actually evolved over the past couple of years. Initially, when GPT first came out, the initial thing that enterprises did is say, let's block all access to this. We have no idea what it's going to do. There's a huge risk associated with that. So the security team was tasked on monitoring and blocking. When that happened, it didn't work at all. There was in the same way that we had shadow IT with organizations going over to the cloud and using SaaS resources and the cloud without any governance, the exact same thing happened with AI. You cannot block a user from using AI if they've had the taste of it and they understand the value that it can provide. There's just no going back. The genie's out of the bottle. So that started to pivot the way that organizations addressed it. Instead of blocking it, then they said, okay, what can we enable in a secure way and address the needs of the users? So this is where internal capabilities started being developed, internal chatbots, internal access to information, internal services that would normally be done by SaaS. And it was the CEO of Microsoft, Satya, that said that the age of SaaS is really over, and that generative AI is going to replace SaaS. And that was a really big thing for him to say and acknowledge that because they are such a large SaaS provider. But it's true because the age that we're going into now is on-demand services that are being created by generative AI. So having the ability to create the capabilities that you normally had to go out externally. So organizations are building these things in-house and providing these services on demand. And the only way to really do that is to have cross-department, cross-functional, cross-role engagement. So what used to be in the realm of just the security teams are now becoming roles that are overlaid across SMEs and domain experts in every single part of the organization. So you'll have what's called an AI center of excellence within a company, and this will involve executives. It'll involve finance. It'll involve HR. It'll involve operations, security. All of these different divisions with the company have a seat in there, and they're able to see what the organization is doing. They can talk to each other. And again, this is something that really hasn't happened before. There's been silos within organizations that have stopped this type of communication. But the only way that you're able to adopt the new state of the world and where we're going is to have those cross-functional, cross-role collaborations. There's no other way to do it. You can't have a new silo that has no insight into the way that a business operates. You have to have that perspective from the people on the floor, the people on the line, the people that know the business. You can't overlay a new function as a silo. It's not going to work.
Yeah, no, I agree. There are two schools of thought around. I hear about. We always hear this. Well, we want to break down silos, right? I think we have to go back and ask why. Why are we doing that, right? And everything we do, we have to go back and ask the why, because it actually gives you some insight into in reasoning, right, around conversations, around how people should be thinking about this. Like when I look at silos, right? Silos traditionally are thought of as a bad thing, but if you're siloed and you're collaborative, is it so bad, right? Meaning, is there domain expertise that are traditionally in silos and they're doing what there's and the people that sit in the silo are very good at what they do for what they do, right? But they're being collaborative with everybody else. Is that a bad thing, right? And so there's a couple schools of thought around that, and I think like those silos will still exist. And we talked about departments. Departments, of course, those are completely different job functions: HR, finance, etc. Right? Like HR is not going to understand how to do finance, and finance is not going to understand how to manage people and all that, right? But if you look at like traditional IT silos, right? There's always this, right? Oh, there's storage people and they know how to do that, and there's virtualization people and they know how to do that. But the reality is if there's a collaboration there and a process put in place, right, and in a model, I think we talked about the center of excellence. We didn't really talk about an operating model yet, because I really think there should be an AI operating model too. But then our silo is such a bad thing. So I know that's kind of going off on a tangent, but I think what you said, which is really important, is the word collaboration,
Yeah.
right? And working together. And because AI touches all these different facets, right? It has to be collaborative. Like you said, there's no other way of actually, governing this, right? And making sure it's you're in a good place. So, let's talk about the reality of use cases. Like, what are we seeing for real tangible use cases, right? That enterprises are looking to solve for. And I've heard everything from I want to augment my workforce. Do I want the ability to look at to make decisions and be smarter, do smarter things with my data? All of these different things, that we're seeing play out. And then I think we'll talk about where it's going. I think we want to get to obviously talk about everybody's talking about agents. I think we have to get there, but before we even get there, what are users actually looking at AI to solve right now? From a commonality perspective.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think that with generative AI, it's like giving an organization a Swiss Army knife that can do everything. So sometimes they may be trying to solve solutions with generative AI with the Swiss Army knife that it can do everything, but is it the best way to actually do it? And sometimes it's not. So when you're looking at a use case, you have to think, why should I solve this with AI? Are there other ways to do this first? Can I use predictive AI? Can I use automation to do it? Can I simplify it? Can I, instead of figuring out a way to make a complicated process quicker, why not remove the complexity of the problem in the first place?
Yeah.
So I think those kind of discussions when we're talking about use cases are really important. In terms
Well,
of
yeah, let me just stop you there, because I think
yeah,
this is
sure.
important, because you basically said if a current process is complex, we shouldn't really be looking at AI just AI to solve the complexity of that,
Yeah.
right? And we should be looking at the process itself to determine if it's even a valid process to begin with, right? And I think that's important because I think I've I'm listening to a lot of content. I'm ingest. I think like you, we try to go out and ingest a lot of content because we can't possibly see everything in what we do, right? And so we have to look to others to give us feedback on what they're seeing out there. One of the examples I heard someone talk about, and you and I talked about this yesterday, is you know, going into a sales organization, and the sales organization says, I want AI to solve my conversion rate is 5%, right? I want AI to solve that. And to me, that's such a blanket statement, right? Well, more than likely, AI is not going to solve that. You have a different problem in your sales process or something, and that's happening. Why you have a 5% conversion rate, right? So you're not going. There's not this like, oh, here's this big, gigantic business AI capability that's going to come in and sell more, increase your conversion rate, all of those things, right? Now, the processes within your sales process may be broken or could be enhanced through AI, right? But the issue itself, right, probably will not be solved through that. And then secondly, customers asking for AI to do something new that they don't even want to learn about. They want AI to do it for them, right? And I think that's probably something that is not going to end well for them as well. So I don't know, again, I just wanted to throw it out there, and I know you were going down the path, but of a complex issue where the complexity could be something else where AI doesn't necessarily fix it. Same as in use case, right?
Yep.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead and continue.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely good to talk about that, because sometimes there's processes in place that they don't need to be made quicker. They need to be completely removed. It's like, if you think about back in the day when you had door-to-door salespeople, and I can talk about that because when I was actually like 12 years old, I did door-to-door selling of vacuum cleaners. So so if anybody remembers, like the Kirby vacuum cleaners that were like
Oh yeah.
$3,000, yeah, that was me knocking at your door, back then. But it's like taking that idea and saying, how can I sell more vacuums? Can I get AI to make the people at the door knock quicker? It's like, no, you don't do that. You don't need to make the car go faster. You need to completely dump that. Or saying, how can I make AI get people to buy more VHS cassettes? But these are the analogies that you can really apply to a lot of businesses, where they have to get rid of legacy processes that may have been in there for who knows how many decades, and modernize, look at something new. Like, what are they trying to achieve as a business or as an objective? Can they remove some of this legacy process and move to something new, or refocus their business in a way to make them more competitive, and then uh, get rid of the old processes. So this also goes back over to when companies are moving to the cloud and looking at what makes sense from that perspective. It's the same type of idea. If they have monolithic applications, and they want to go over to the cloud, then yes, they can move those monolithic applications to the cloud. And sometimes that makes sense, from de-risking in the environment and moving to a more agile environment and being able to dynamically scale and that type of thing. But it also makes sense that some applications may need to be refactored. So you change it from monolithic over to microservices, embrace cloud native. There's a certain cost associated with that, but there's a benefit associated with that as well. Then there's another kind of application where you deprecate it and you remove it from the environment, and you get rid of that dead weight, and you look to the future. So the same type of methodology needs to be applied over to AI. So when you're looking at use cases, you have to take that into context. Can I remove the legacy? Can I change the processes so that they are in line with what I'm trying to do with AI, instead of just making old things go faster? Um, But from a use case perspective of where you're able to adapt and change, that goes down to analyzing business processes. And if you know how certain workflows are done, then you're able to apply AI over to that. So that may be going through automating certain aspects of that, or if you have a multi-stage workflow where there's time in between and then there's manual effort in between, that can be automated by creating agents that have access to all of these different sources. And then based on what you're trying to achieve, it's able to access those different sources and do your ETL processes and convert data and analyze data and do that in an automated fashion. So this is something that you can't really do manually. You can't really do the old way. Even if you have thousands of more people, it's not going to make them go any faster. But with AI, you're actually able to do that. So you're able to um, automate things that should be automated quicker, do it a lot faster. Um, and those are some ways that you can use AI in terms of use cases. Other ways are being able to do code generation and code completion, um, and working with existing code that you may have, and doing things like refactoring, looking at risks. I know that using AI for development and code analysis is probably one of the biggest use cases that I really see out there. So the way that you can do this is you take an entire code base that you have, and you can have your AI review that in code base, look for the things that are coded poorly, look for areas where there's no documentation, provide documentation on that so you can understand the application. This will allow you to do a couple things. You can fix issues more quickly, you can expand the capabilities of your applications a lot more quickly, and you can also do refactoring over to other languages or platforms a lot more quickly. This is where I see organizations that are trying to do refactoring from legacy code over to cloud native code, that they've done the initial assessment and it looks like it may take years and a lot of subject matter experts in order to do that. Um, with AI, you can analyze the code base, you can understand the entire code base as an expert, which with some legacy uh, code is very difficult to do because the experts don't exist anymore. So that knowledge is hard to come by. So once you do that, then you can refactor it to new code, new libraries, new platform, go from legacy, go to cloud native, and do that very, very quickly. Amazon said that once they started leveraging generative AI for code generation, that over the course of a single year, they saved the equivalent of, I think it was 4,500 years of developer time over that 1 year. So they're using it for the majority of coding. I think it's like 90% of the code that they're doing right now. And this is going to be the way that it is with many organizations going forward. Um, if a developer is not using generative AI for coding right now or within the next year, they're essentially going to be out of a job. That's that's just the way that it is. It's not even about being replaced by generative AI. It's about using the tools to their maximum capability. So
Yeah.
developers are going to have to fully embrace it, and organizations have a huge opportunity to um, leverage that for doing all kinds of innovative things.
Yeah. I mean, is it fair to say that um, we're not, I mean, organizations aren't looking at AI to basically say, oh, I don't need a development team anymore, right? That's kind of really not how it's playing out, right? I mean, the whole human in the loop thing is still applicable, right? It's not,
Oh yeah,
AI is not, we haven't really reached this superhuman intelligence or super beyond human intelligence yet, at least in the enterprise, right? And I think that's another thing. We can talk about that too, but there's two things that comes up out of that. Number one, we're looking to augment, right? I think AI is looking to be an augmentation, not a replacement right now. Now, of course, there's always the people out there talking about in 20 years, humans are going to need to figure out new jobs, right, or whatever, right? And I'm not saying that that's not going to happen. Um, I mean, honestly, I don't think it's going to happen because I think there's still the problem of creativity, imagination, and those things that AI has, in my opinion, yet to solve. I mean, we can sit here and say that, like, the music that's part that you hear when you come on my channel when I start my kick off my podcast, that's all AI generated music, right? But it's not like there's no emotion behind creating that, the creativity of that, right? So when you look at like artists and creativity and emotion, those things, obviously AI doesn't have those things yet. So I think it'll be a long time before AI completely replaces humans for a majority of tasks. Um, but to get back what I was saying, it's really about augmenting what you're doing, right? It's an augmentation, not just from we didn't talk about the personal aspects of AI, like how you should be using it, but starting with augmenting what you're doing, using it as a tool, right, to enhance your capability to, like you said, deliver software, to check your software to make sure it's being delivered faster, make sure the code looks right. Maybe it's doing automatic linting, right, something like that. And just being able to deliver applications and user experiences at a much faster, right, at a high velocity, right. And I think that's certainly part of it. Um, but you were at the conference, and I want to get to this too. And you talk to enterprise customers. Like, what are they asking for? What are they asking for help with, like right now, or what do you see as the most common? I wouldn't say misconception, but common thing being asked by the people that you talked to at the conference.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern that they have is how can they get started? How can they get to value it as quickly as possible? And how can they ensure that the way that they structure things actually align with where the future is going? The biggest challenge is that since we're entering a new type of Moore's law, where there was a study that was done that says that every 7 months the capabilities are exponentially growing, and the cost of um, compute is going up because you have these new capabilities. And it was a Jensen Huang that said that the change in resources that are required to support reasoning models and thinking models, as opposed to your regular generative AI models, is 100x in terms of the amount of tokens and the infrastructure that's put it in place. Um, Companies are not going to pay 100x in order to get these new capabilities, so they have to determine what are they going to implement, how are they going to do that, and what can they do within the budgets that they have to get the maximum value without going down a path that they can't get out of in the future. So they don't want to, at least the enterprise that I've talked to, they want to move quickly, but they don't want to move too quick. They want to be able to get value, but not be locked into a certain architecture path that would be difficult for them to pivot in the future. So what I'm seeing organizations do is first go down the path of providing some internal value to their own organization, so enabling their staff to become comfortable with AI. So that may be working with chatbots, doing automation, getting
Co-pilot.
insights on the data. Yeah,
Yeah.
Copilot it, plus, like,
Right.
beyond that.
Yeah.
um, but once they get to a certain level of maturity, then they say, okay, this is great internally. We've enabled our staff. Now let's look at what other parts of the company can we apply this to. Then there's internal business processes. There's automation of infrastructure. Then once you go down on that path, then all of those learnings that you get in house, you can then apply over to external customers, which has more risk associated with that. And an example of the risk associated with providing or exposing capabilities to external customers is that if you don't have the internal knowledge to secure that from bias, risk of attack, and so on, then you're putting your customers at risk. And this has been shown a few times where I think it was like a Chevy dealership came out with a chatbot that did uh, allow people to buy or get purchase agreements that were legally binding, and then through uh, prompt engineering and you're fiddling with the prompts with the chatbot, somebody was able to get, I think it was like a Chevy Tahoe for like $1 or something like that. So having those types of exposure are very, very dangerous to an organization. So before you start exposing your customers to that, you have to go through the internal process of learnings and apply and do it in a very quick and iterative manner with a lot of visibility on it. So don't move too slow, don't move too fast, have the ability to pivot in between different ways of doing things. And there's never going to be one way fits all types of scenarios. There may be some scenarios where you need to have all your infrastructure that's running on-prem, because that's where your data is. You may have some instances where you're moving over to the cloud and you want to have the same sort of capabilities that you do on-prem in the cloud. So then it makes sense to have access over to your inferencing and your AI infrastructure in both environments. Perhaps you're using multiple cloud providers in order to provide that. So again, having a unified way of accessing those different cloud providers and on-prem, that's also very important. Not being locked into a single type of platform is hugely beneficial. I think that's where the industry is going, moving away from lock-ins. In the large language model ecosystem, you can kind of see this with the development of open models, which traditionally had been challenged against the foundational models that are out there from OpenAI or Google Gemini or so on. But now we're seeing reasoning models that use like 2% of the overall compute that's required to provide the same sort of outcome. And these can be run locally or in on-prem environments in a controlled manner.
Right.
So instead of going out and paying massive amounts of money, you're able to leverage some of the capabilities of these new reasoning models in an on-prem environment. So if you're stuck in a specific ecosystem, you may not have that capability to do that. So having optionality in your infrastructure and pivoting quickly and iterating and adapting to the market, that's what organizations are looking for. And there's no silver bullet to that yet. But I think Nutanix as a company, we're applying that same ideology and methodology to our platform processes, that we're probably providing the most optionality out there from a multi-cloud perspective, on-prem perspective, and access to all the different models that are out there to align with the use cases that organizations are trying to do. So I had a lot of conversations with customers and alliance partners out there, and even competitors over at GTC. And I think these are some of the concerns that everyone's having. Like, which way is the industry going to pivot, and how do customers have the ability to adapt new technologies, new processes, and have that optionality?
Yeah, no, that's great. And not to sell ourselves, but I mean, I think what you talked about and how customers are actually going through this is the same way of what we're doing at Nutanix, right? I mean, the reality is that we are enhancing internal processes, right? And we are allowing our workforce to leverage AI in a smart way. Um, at the same time, uh, we're also giving benefit back to our customers. So, for example, like the support GPT process, right? Where our time to resolution for ticket closure, right, has lessened, right? So that's a direct impact to a customer experience, right? And then and that's before we're even thinking about putting it really into product yet. And I know we've had some AI in the product, like machine learning, right, in the product already. And of course, we have some AI capability in NKP through the chatbot, right? The AI navigator, we call it. But before we even put it into product, I think it's like you said, it's extremely important. Anything you do before customer facing, you have to learn yourself on how to do this. And the only way to do that is kind of eat your own dog food. I guess is that what they say?
I think it's
Um,
drink your own champagne now.
drink your own champagne or eat your own dog food, whatever, right? But I like drink your own champagne better. But yeah, it's we have to customers have to kind of go down that path first before they're not going to just blanketly go out to their customer and say, "Hey, we got this new AI service," without understanding how to operate it. Right? It's the same. It's the same with anything, right? Anything you do for a customer, you really have to figure out how to do it yourself before you present it to the customer. So look, I know we got 4 minutes left. I just want to get a quick summary from you on where the industry is going. I know we talked about where customers are at today and what they really should be looking at, and I appreciate that because I think that's what customers want to talk about. Like, what can we do now? Where does it make sense for us now? How can I navigate the noise? But let's talk about the noise for a minute because obviously you went to the conference and there's a lot of exciting innovation that's happening. Can we talk about everybody's talking about agents.
Yep.
Let's finish up on that and where and you talked a little bit about this, right? Being able to augment a workforce or give a low level task or a task, right, to an agent or multiple agents and have them go through this workflow, right, to accomplish something, right, to deliver either code or one of the examples I was building in FlowWise as an example was the example you talked about, having a programmer develop something, right, obviously give them a prompt to develop an app, then having the supervisor kind of manage that process, hit a developer agent, and then that developer agent passes it off to a code review agent to make sure the code is right and gives it feedback, et cetera, or make changes to the code to make your code better. So small example, but I'm just curious, like where are agents where are agents going to really play, and how should customers be looking at agents?
I think the easiest way to think about this, and the definition of an agent is it changes depending on who you talk to. So my definition of an agent is um, an AI or a piece of code that has access over to knowledge and tools and is able to act autonomously or semi-autonomously. It may have a persona associated with it. It may have a team of other agents that it works with. So you have like an agent crew, and it's able to do things through an automated or a non pre-planned way. What I'm seeing in the industry is when you look at a use case, how can you apply agents over to that use case? So if you take a business process diagram and you map that out over to, let's say, a graphical representation, you can take a lot of those business processes, you can actually replace them with agents. So if you want to figure out a use case, you whiteboard it and you swap out those processes with agents so that they can actually do things. And this is the way that many organizations in the industry are doing. And you can get these predefined use cases as pre-created blueprints. And those blueprints will have your large language models, your memory that's associated with it, your databases that are associated with it. So just like you have a logical architectural view, these are the blueprints that are being used to create use cases. So these types of blueprints are a very, very easy way to deliver a use case without going in and building everything from scratch. Now, NVIDIA has a lot of NIMs and blueprints that enable organizations to do that. We're able to run those directly on our platform. And we have a great partnership with NVIDIA. There's also other ways that you can build these out. And one way to tie these different processes together are through a library that's called LangChain. So LangChain allows you to connect those different processes. To front end LangChain, you can have a visual way of doing that. LangFlow, FlowWise, N8N, these are all open source solutions that allow you to do that. So building out use cases, blueprinting them, and then codifying that so that they can be deployed very, very easily through Helm charts that you have on Kubernetes, through infrastructure as code. So you can take an idea that's validated, deploy that, iterate it, upgrade that. That's really where I see agents playing in this whole thing as the key nodes in the overall use case adoption.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's I think agents are really going to blow this thing up. To be honest with you, I mean, I just think just the possibilities, right, of how this can all play out in a lot of organizations. Um, the one thing I think about agents though is the reason. One, some of the things I talk about, and one of the things I talked about, I had a meeting the other day about this, is the resources that are going to be needed behind that,
Yeah.
right? Because I think like when we talk about like chat, it's fairly simple, right? You target an LLM, you interface with the LLM, right, and you get information back. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about adding your data through RAG or anything like that. I'm just talking about your basic, right, where ChatGPT started, kind of, right. Now, when you look at agents, these agents could have access to multiple different models. You could have a reasoning model. You could have other different models that each agent needs to access, and that requires compute, right, to allow that to happen. And then, of course, when you add RAG to that in your data, you're going to have an embedding model and all these other different things. So, in a vector database, and chunking needs to happen, and all these things that need to happen for all this to work, as you go through, depending on how complex the flow is, right, and how much you want to take it. But the compute requirement, I would imagine, is going to grow exponentially with agents. Do you agree with that? Or, I mean, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, definitely. So the best way they can think about the compute requirements that are required and the cost that's associated with that is getting down to the common denominator, which is tokens. When you interact with the large language model, when you convert words into things that it can actually represent, you're looking at token consumption. So there's a certain amount of cost with tokens going in, which is your prompt and your RAG data and anything else that you put in, and then there's token coming out. So that's the result that the large language model actually gives you. If you just interact with the model directly, then you have a certain amount that's associated with that. If you have RAG, then you take whatever data you also want to add to your prompt. So that may be a PDF, it may be an image, maybe a Word document, and maybe like some SQL data, and you add that to the tokens. So that's your next step up in cost is associated with the RAG. The next thing that you have in terms of the level of cost is when you start having agents that are doing reasoning, they generate a huge number of tokens explaining their thought process, creating subtasks, and then iterating on those subtasks, having memory associated with that. So every action, every task that an agent does has an exponential amount of tokens associated with that. If you're leveraging like a single model that is very, very intelligent, you're going to be spending a crazy amount of money doing that. So you have to figure out what can I do with a smaller model? What can I do with a smaller amount of tokens? And then have those agents route over to the ones that make sense to keep your costs down. If you don't do that, your costs from your regular chatbot to agents is going to be exponential, and it will not be something that's planned for. Businesses cannot have 100x increase in their costs by just adding on a new capability in IT. It's not feasible. So you
Yeah.
have to be able to structure it so that the agents can route over to the models that make sense. If you're running everything in a controlled environment where you have access to the GPUs and the infrastructure, and you're not paying a per token or per API cost, then you can dramatically reduce the cost that's associated with that. Use the cloud-based foundational models with reasoning for specific things that require that, and for the rest, run it on smaller language models or medium-sized language models to reduce 95% of the cost by doing it that way.
Yeah, and and we're talking, you're talking about the cloud side of it is obviously the pay by the drip issue, right? Where you're hitting the API and they're charging you every time you hit the API, et cetera, right? but also the infrastructure behind it. If you look even on prem, right, the GPU requirements, all those things, I would imagine in those smaller model use cases that you could now look at vGPU instead of pass through, right? Those types of things to kind of help out with that, to kind of help with cost. My thing is, again, I know NVIDIA is a big partner of ours, but I really think like what's going to blow this up. I mean, besides quantum, and quantum's going to be very expensive. So, even if it comes out in 6, 7 years, quantum is going to be massively expensive, to start with, right?
Yeah.
Before it's even feasible for, traditional enterprise to leverage it, right? My thoughts are the company or the innovator that actually solves the hardware problem around this is going to be like the next big thing, right? And maybe there is something in the wings I don't know of, that because again, if I got to buy H1000s and all these all of these GPUs, right, which are massive amounts of money, and it's not just the GPUs too. I think there's a misnomer here that you don't need CPU. You do need CPU as well.
Yeah.
And then of course the infrastructure behind pushing data, right, requires compute. Fast data requires. I don't think we have to think holistically about this. When you start looking at feeding GPUs data, you have to have very fast compute pushing that data at throughput, right? And I think that's another thing. And of course GPUs can help there too, but that's still cost. And I think, like you said, right? I think it's not that you're not using kind of the same types of hardware. You're just looking at how to use it smarter through smaller LLMs, through possible vGPU versus pass through, right? As an example for specific use cases, and maybe chunking up. And I don't want to use the word chunking, but segmenting the infrastructure that you have, to get the most use out of it, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think that you also need to take Moore's law for AI into account as well. New models are constantly coming out. You need to be able to adapt quickly, change your blueprints so that you can improve quality and reduce costs. So you have to have the capability of doing life cycle management of your models and your infrastructure and swapping those parts out as quickly as the market is innovating. And that will save you costs and increase your capabilities.
Yeah, and that includes even prompt engineering, right? Because if
Yeah.
if you're focused on if you can get the prompt, and there's also a company, there's also some innovation happening there. And I don't know if you've probably read about it already, but there was a guy who started a company around how they're doing prompt engineering, and they're able to get the accuracy to 99% based on how they do prompt engineering,
Yeah.
right? So the hallucinations, right, are very small amount of hallucinations, because when you have hallucinations, obviously that's more compute to redo that work, right? I have to go back and redo it, or I have to correct something, or whatever. So that requires more time, more compute, more money. And so even at that layer, right, in the prompt engineering perspective, if you can get, if you can diminish your hallucinations to 1%, right, or even less than that, that's going to help tremendously in cost, right, in the long run, right? So, and of course,
Yeah.
accuracy and outcome, right? So,
Yeah, some people think that since the reasoning models are coming out, the prompt engineering is dead. That you don't need to worry about prompt engineering anymore because the models will just figure out what you're trying to do. But it's not the case. Prompt engineering has definitely evolved a lot. Initially we had a chain of thought, types of prompt
right,
engineering where you say, do this step by step. Now we have a new iteration of that, which is called a chain of draft, where it basically says instead of the long-winded chain of thought, only use like or summarize each thought down to like 10 words, and then use that going forward, so you can dramatically reduce the overall prompts or tokens that are being used, but get a decent output at the same. Or you can do caching as well on the prompt. So if something is prompt is semantically similar and is asking the same question but with different words, that there's actually a cached response that you can have, so it doesn't have to go out over to the GPUs or the
right.
resources to do that. So there's lots of techniques that you can put in place in order to reduce the cost and the load on the environment. But you have to start working at the details through the blueprints, understand where the limitations are, understand where you want to optimize, and then work with those components. But just getting your hands dirty and having a playground where you can build a solution and iterate on that. I think that's what organizations need to start doing is, get out the Play-Doh, figuring out how you can learn, enable internal staff, find the use cases that make the most sense in terms of value, the low-hanging fruit, iterate on there, share the knowledge, and expand to create value.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you again taking the time on a Saturday to talk with us. Very valuable conversation, very valuable for me. Hopefully, that'll translate back to our viewers here, and I look forward to having you on hopefully again as we go down this. So next week we're gonna actually show Nutanix Enterprise AI in some demos. So I'm excited to actually do that. And then at some point I want to get you back here to really talk about because I'm gonna really go back to cloud native technologies and I really want to focus on where, how cloud native technologies are enabling AI, right? Because I think they go hand in hand. I don't think it's this one off thing. The fact that Kubernetes is distributed and our platform is distributed, of course, and um, the ability to scale, right? I think is what we're talking about when it comes to requirements around AI use cases and things like that. And I think it's just a good fit and a good discussion we can have there. So again, I appreciate it. I hope you have a great day and thanks for joining, Damon.
That's great. Thanks for having me.
No problem.